A warm welcome to our webinar this afternoon to WQE History. My name's Kate Brett, I'm the Head of Humanities, but I'm also a history teacher. And myself and my colleague Duncan Omond, who you can see below, are going to be talking you through the options for doing history with us from September. And so I hope you'll be informed by that, and as we go through, if you have any questions that you would like to ask us, there's a function of being able to ask that via the Zoom technology. So if you just have a you can feel free to ask them at any point, and make sure that sorry, there was a phone going off, isn't there? This time it was mine. And just make sure that you've got your answers in. So I'll announce questions at the end of it, so that you can just make sure you have a chance to do them if you haven't done them through the presentation, and we'll answer them as best we can. Right, so we love history. We think it's an amazing subject, and so part of what we're doing today is trying to sort of convey that to you, but we also know there are some practical questions that you want answers to, so hopefully you'll get some of those. But we thought we'd start by just making the point about how varied the sort of people who do history at university or higher study are. So if you just have a look at those faces, I imagine that you will recognise a few of them. We have prime ministers and presidents and future monarchs and journalists and performers. There's a whole variety of people who are well known now who have studied history at university. And one of the reasons for that is because history is something that people regard very highly. It's possible that you've learned about the idea of facilitating subjects. These are subjects that some of the top universities recommend that you study, and history is one of them. And there's a good reason for that. It's because it delivers a very rigorous education. It develops skills that are really highly regarded. And so we obviously recommend it to you on that basis. It's demanding, it's recognised, it's traditional, and we teach it very well. So a few things that you need to know about studying history. It is a very literary subject. There we are. And so if you are not going to get a grade 5 or higher in your English language, then you probably are going to struggle with it as a course. And so I'd want you to think very carefully about that element of it. If you don't do a lot of reading and writing naturally, you're going to find this difficult because history requires that of you. And so, obviously be really clear that that's what it's about. We also, if in terms of meeting the requirements of the course, would want you to have got a 5 in history if you studied before. We should just say that you don't have to have studied history before, and if in that case we would be looking at your English and language and literature grades to kind of get a sense of. Oh, I'm so sorry, this is awful. I'll turn this off completely. I thought I'd done that earlier. Okay, so there's another element to being a good historian, and that is that you really need to be curious. You need to be somebody who enjoys finding out information, who is inquisitive about life and about the world. And so if you're somebody who enjoys reading newspapers and just finding out about the world, and there's quite a lot on the news at the moment, isn't there? Then it's the sort of thing that you might enjoy. We want you, by the end of this, to be able to explain what you think clearly, to be able to write well, and to be really determined, because it is a course that demands a lot of you. So just a few things to sort of point out in terms of history and what it's like. So in terms of what we offer you at WQE, this year is a little bit different because of some peculiarities of timetabling. We actually have 3 choices where normally we would offer you 2. So the first choice is a very traditional one that we've offered for many years very successfully, and that is that you can study your breadth British study with the Tudors. So obviously a very famous family, and it covers quite a long period of time, as you can see from the Battle of Bosworth, with our local hero, Richard III, meeting his end, right up until the death of Queen Elizabeth. The second part of that is the depth study into revolution and dictatorship in Russia between 1917 and 1953. Now, I know that some of you will have had some of this material that you've done at GCSE, which is absolutely fine, but it is obviously at a deeper level. So that's route 1. Route 2 offers a very different take. So the breadth side of it is looking at the making of the USA, so from the end of the Civil War in 1865 through to 1975, so just over 100 years. The British side of it is looking at the English Revolution. So this is the moment in British history where we execute a monarch and we have 11 years as a republic. It's the only time in England's history where that's happened. And so why that happens and why we abandon republicanism for monarchy and bring back Charles II in 1660 is the focus of what you do. The third route combines some Tudors with some American history. So this time the American history is a depth study, but looking at post-war America up until 1980. There's a limited amount of option for this. There's only one class that's going to be running to do this, but it is an option that we offer. Now, when you come to select which choice you have, we will tell everybody the same thing, which is that we will do our best to give you your preference, but we can't guarantee it. So we just we would try and fit people in where they want to go, but obviously timetabling sometimes provides clashes and things like that, and so we can't guarantee it. Okay, so a few other things about A-level history. So the exam board is AQA, and there are another couple of bits of detail there in terms of the proportional sections that you're looking at. So the breadth paper and the depth paper, oh, it doesn't want to stay on there, I'm not touching anything, are 40%, and then coursework is 20%. And the coursework is really exciting, and it's going to take us on there now. So we have a variety of options for you with coursework, and it's an extended essay, but the topics are really interesting. So the Crusades, European witchcraft, African American civil rights, a different number of German history questions, and the abolition of slavery. So history, as we were saying earlier, is really highly valued because it gives you a number of things that you are able to do. And all of those things are there. I'm going to just, keep my finger on this in case it jumps on too far. Now, we talk a lot about supporting students in their learning, and we would do that through a variety of ways. We're going to look in a little bit at WQE Online, which provides resources, but we also will have additional support options in terms of academic coaches, teachers offering tutorials, and also mentoring from other students, which is a really great way to learn more and kind of get some help from people who've really experienced it in the same way as you are. When we talk about independent learning, one of the things that we mean by that is your capacity to be able to get on with things without somebody holding your hand. And of course, that's one of the key indicators of being able to do higher level study. Now, we don't expect you to do that straight away, but we do expect you to prepare for lessons, to be able to review what you've done in your lessons, to make sure that you're going beyond what we do in the classroom, and to therefore be in a position to get on with essays and other assignments. And of course, if we are still as restricted as we are at the moment in lockdown, that will be being done sort of digitally as well as in person. So I mentioned WQE Online earlier. This is where we kind of keep all our resources and students are able to go to get their help. So this, you can just see there the English Revolution page, so you can kind of see what it looks like. So there's all sorts of links and different things. The next one is the coursework options, and you can see the variety of things there that we have allocated. And students find this a really helpful way to kind of just investigate and go at their own pace a little bit more. So in a normal year, we would plan visits, and so we're going to hope to be able to do some of these. So we've previously done visits to the Tower of London, we go up to the Civil War Centre at Newark, there's a Civil Rights Day that the university often puts on that we've been to, and there's a really fantastic opportunity with the Lessons from Auschwitz project, which normally takes students can apply to go on a day trip to Poland to the Auschwitz camp and to kind of experience that, and that's available to WQE students. So that was a whirlwind tour through studying history at WQE. So I'm going to open up the questions now and have a look in just a moment to those. So if you have any questions that you'd like myself or Duncan to answer, now would be a really good time to type them in. And I'll just open that up, or maybe I'll need to close this. Actually, I can't see it on this, so I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can see the questions that exist. Or maybe there just weren't any questions. If you've got any, now would be a good time. There we go. They're all appearing suddenly. That's great. Thank you, everybody. All right. So, Duncan, Aisha is asking, what does history pair well with?
That's a really good question. I suppose traditionally people would often pair history with things like English, with other humanities subjects, things like politics, things like law. It goes well with business, with economics. But we've had a number of students that have done history with sciences and been extremely successful. Sometimes history can give them a kind of a different edge, as it were. Lots of our students do kind of art subjects and so forth. There aren't necessarily any right or wrong answers. I mean, you know, things like sociology, psychology, English, economics, politics tend to be more common because of the kind of shared essay writing skills and things like that. But there aren't necessarily any right or wrong combinations. Ms. Brett, can you think of anything?
Yeah, no, I think that's really true. We've had a real variety over the years, haven't we? And of course, because you're being asked to write, other essay-based subjects are useful for sort of supporting that. But you know, I'm thinking of currently one of my students who has got a place at Oxford to do history next year, and she did history and maths and biology. So you know, it just depends, and there's a, you know, I think we would always advise you to do subjects that you really enjoy, because you'll work hard at those ones. So Joe asked about the exam board. I hope that was just because he was asking it before before I dealt with that, but it's the AQA exam board. Yeah. So you can have a look on their site if you want to get a little bit more information on that. So there's another question. What is the best way to study for A-level history?
Right. Oh, that's an interesting one. I suppose with enthusiasm is the most important thing. There are lots of different ways that we study inside the classroom and outside. Obviously, you know, depending on the state of lockdown, that might change things a little bit. But one of the things that our students always say when we kind of ask them questions, when we do surveys with them and so on, is they always comment on the variety of different methods we use within the classroom, and lots of different activities and so forth. I mean, obviously, you need to be hardworking. You need to be keen if you want to do well. And the independent learning side is normally the thing that students find the most challenging initially, just because it's so different from how, you know, kind of secondary schools normally run, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you know, just in some ways, kind of you learn to do it as you go along, don't you? And your teachers
Yeah.
will give you lots of advice from the beginning. But yeah, I think just recognizing that a lot more of it is about you being organised, knowing what, you know, reviewing what you do and don't know, and then actually filling in the gaps when you don't know something. So,
I mean, one thing on that, I suppose, is that the GCSE that you will have done probably prepares you better than some of the older
yeah,
versions of that,
yeah.
because you will have been studying, you know, for 2, sometimes 3 years at GCSE. In normal circumstances, that would have come down to an exam at the end. So I suppose one of the things with history is, you know, kind of keeping it ticking over and keeping the content fresh and kind of keeping yourself excited with it, revising as you go along. All of those kinds of things are really useful.
Yeah, great. So Holly has asked us, how many face-to-face lessons are there in a week?
So in a normal week, history has the same number as every other subject, which is 4 lessons a week, which are an hour and 10 minutes each. So you'd have 4 hours 40 inside the classroom, and then for each one of those, we'd expect you to do the same or perhaps a little bit more outside lessons. So it would be the equivalent of about 5 hours outside the classroom. So 4 lessons a week. Normally, for most students, those would be on different days of the week. So we don't, unlike some colleges, we wouldn't kind of block things so that you'd have a whole morning of history and a whole afternoon and nothing else in between. Normally, most students have a history lesson on different days.
Yeah. It's worth just probably adding to that that we're not in normal circumstances at
Of
the
course,
moment.
yeah.
So I think any of the answers that we say when we say normally this is what we do,
Yeah.
obviously, there's a little bit of a, we're not quite sure how this is going to be in September, but hopefully. So I think what we can guarantee is that we will give you the same work as regularly as you would have had it, and we'll be using every platform and opportunity to make sure that you're well prepared. So it might be slightly different to this if we're still in lockdown by then, but we'll kind of, that's 2 months away, so we'll think about that later.
I think that's definitely worth saying. Yeah.
So Alec was asking, when do we have to choose our coursework option?
So normally we launch the coursework in the first year, but after Christmas. So we give you a term to kind of get yourself settled into the history, get used to it, to start to make progress with things like essay writing, to kind of make friends and find your feet in college and so forth. And then we have quite a structured approach with the coursework where over the next 2 terms you develop your kind of research skills and you teach yourself the background to your question, and then in the second year you come on and you actually start writing your question, which combines different elements. So there's an essay element to it, and the whole thing is crafted as an essay. But you also have to look at historical interpretations and you have to look at sources. So we've got a series of activities that kind of help you prepare for that and build up to that slowly. And we normally give people a free choice on their coursework. So people in our classes will be doing a range of different options. So we have a kind of menu of different topics, and then you can pick a topic that's interesting for you. I mean, there's a slight caveat that it does depend slightly on resources. If everyone one year wanted to do witchcraft, we probably wouldn't have the books and the kind of physical resources for that. But that doesn't tend to happen very often because most people want to study slightly different things.
Yeah, and also it's worth just saying if you've studied the American units, the American coursework option is considered too close by the exam board, and so you wouldn't have the option of that. But obviously, you can choose any of the other ones.
So if you do either of the American units, you can't do civil rights just because you'll be asked questions in the exam on civil rights. So it's not really fair for your coursework to be on the same topic, and that's how the exam board tends to see things.
Yeah. So there's a question here, would Matthew Hopkins relate to European witchcraft? That's a very niche question, and since I run the witchcraft option, I can answer that one for you. Yes, definitely. So interestingly, if you have done if you do the Tudor and trying to think, Russia combination, then the proportion of English content that you can put into your NEA is different to if you do the Stuart and American one. So it's probably easier to leave that question onwards until you're actually here and we've got a little bit more time.
If you choose the Stuarts
Yes, that's right.
and the English Revolution, Matthew Hopkins is part of the kind of the second year of that, when we look at kind of radicalism and we look at the development of all sorts of kind of different ideas that come about as a result of the Civil War and the execution of Charles.
Yeah. So good question. I'm glad you know who Matthew Hopkins is. Good. Okay, so Shweta is asking, where can we contact you if we need help over the summer?
I suppose the easiest way is via email. in terms of
Probably via
contacting the
admissions, I
history
would think.
department.
Yeah.
In terms of admissions, there's a separate admissions email, but I'm happy for people to email me. I think that was on the PowerPoint. Was it still on the PowerPoint?
It wasn't, but it's on the website. If
Yeah.
you, yeah. I think so.
And on the information sheets, there's the history thing. We do have a Twitter account, and we post kind of irregularly on that, kind of, you know, a couple of times a week. So if you ask us questions via Twitter, it might take slightly longer to get back to you. But yeah, we should, if you email us a question, we should be able to answer it, you know, within a few days or so.
Okay, now Samaya and Morgan have got pretty much the same question. And it's about the kind of whether history would help you in any way with a degree in medicine or in the medical field.
That's a really interesting one. There's different thoughts about this. Different medicals, in terms of medicine, all medical schools require chemistry as one of your 3 A levels. And then some have a slight preference for biology, some have a slight preference for maths. And so lots of students will end up doing chemistry, biology, and maths just to cover all of their kind of options there. But there is sometimes an advantage to doing an essay-based subject like history alongside chemistry and another science, because it does really show a different side of your kind of academic skills. And the fact that you can interpret evidence, the fact that you can communicate well, all of those things are of huge benefit if you end up wanting to apply for medicine. So certainly history wouldn't necessarily be held, you know, certainly wouldn't be held against you. A good grade in history would be important. What I would say is that medical schools are very, very competitive. So you would be looking at kind of A stars, predictions pretty much across the board, across all of your subjects.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's certainly, we've had people study history in the past that have gone on to become doctors.
Yeah, I've got another one this year who's studying history with us, but has got a place to do medicine. So it definitely is something that we've kind of seen quite regularly,
Yeah.
if not frequently. Yeah. Okay. So a couple of questions about essays. So for a high grade, what would the essay be like? And Aisha was asking how long are essays? So a little bit about what we're looking for in an essay and how long they might be.
Well, I suppose that the how long bit kind of slightly depends on the size of your handwriting and various kind of things like that. The easiest way to say it, I suppose, is that essays in the exam are 45 minutes. So you'd be expected to write an answer to a particular question in about 45 minutes. So I suppose, you know, it varies between students, but about 3 sides of A4, something around that kind of mark, 3 to 4 sides, in a kind of answer booklet. What would it be like? Well, I suppose one of the key things with the essay is that it's designed to give an argument to actually answer a particular question. So we're looking for you to actually kind of weigh up the evidence, but actually make sure that you're picking a side. And one of the things we'll work with you in class over the 2 years on is how to construct that kind of argument, and how to be able to kind of weigh up the evidence